So for this deep dive, we're starting not with a discovery, but with an end. Picture a research lab. Sterile, bright lights, the usual. Dr. Sarah Chen, a geneticist, is just doing a standard procedure.
Something she's done 1,000 times before.
Exactly. And she slips on a wet floor tile. She hits her head.
And right there, that's where the ordinary just completely stops.
Yeah.
The source material describes what happened in the 4 minutes after the accident. It should have just been darkness, unconsciousness.
But for her, it was an awakening.
A total awakening.
Yeah.
Time.
Yeah.
Time. As we feel it, like a river flowing forward, it just stops for her.
Yeah, and this wasn't just like a life flashing before your eyes kind of thing. She saw her entire existence from the very beginning to that moment on the lab floor, all laid out at the same time.
Like a sculpture.
Exactly, a frozen sculpture. And then she looks over and she sees the same thing for her student, Miguel. His whole life, birth to death, just there, visible.
And that realization she had in those last 4 minutes, that's really the core of what we're digging into today. We're looking at sources that claim this wasn't just some fantasy.
No, they claim it's a scientifically verifiable truth. The idea that all life on Earth is, literally one single continuous organism.
I mean, that's a huge claim to start a deep dive with.
It's massive. We're basically asking if the idea of being an individual, that I am me and you are you, is just a trick of the mind.
An artifact of how our brains process time.
Right. And we've got sources from cellular biology, from cosmology, all over the map. So we're going to try and give you the roadmap to understanding this whole thing.
We'll break it down into 3 steps. First, we'll ground ourselves in the science, the stuff we can actually verify. The unbroken cellular chain.
Then we get into the weird stuff.
The 4-dimensional visualization that helps explain this illusion of being separate. And finally, we'll see how that physical reality might link up to a bigger idea of shared consciousness.
Okay, so let's start with the facts. Section 1, the unbroken chain. This is the easy part, sort of.
Sort of, yeah. So when we talk about common ancestry, most people immediately think of genetics, right? We share 98% of our DNA with chimpanzees.
Which is already pretty mind-blowing.
It is, but this idea is way more radical. It's not about shared blueprints, shared genes. It's about a literal, uninterrupted physical continuation, the actual material.
Okay, so break that down. Every single cell in your body.
Every neuron, every skin cell, yeah.
It all comes from that first fertilized egg. And that egg cell came from your mother's cells, which came from her mother's cells, and on and on.
And the key is that at no point in that line, going all the way back, did the cellular material just stop and get replaced by something new. It's just been dividing and flowing forward.
So it's not like getting a copy of a recipe. It's like getting a piece of the original sourdough starter.
That's a great way to put it. It's not a copy. It's a continuation. The cytoplasm, the mitochondria. It's a literal thread of living matter that has been continuously alive for billions of years. It has never, ever been severed.
Okay, but hold on. The immediate question I know you're thinking is, what about cell death? I mean, my skin cells die and fall off constantly. That has to break the chain, right?
That's the critical question.
Yeah.
And the distinction is between the germ line and the somatic line. Most of your body, your organs, your skin, those are somatic cells.
They're disposable.
They're disposable, exactly. They're the temporary house built by the organism. They die. But the thread, the thing that ensures this continuity, is the line that leads to the next generation, the reproductive cells.
Ah, okay. So our individual bodies are like temporary branches on the tree, but the core trunk, the part that can make new seeds, that material has never stopped.
Precisely. And once you get that, the scale of it just explodes. Your thread merges with your parents, your grandparents. Go back just a couple 100,000 years, and every human on Earth shares that one single ancestral thread in Africa.
And then you really start flying backwards. That same actual living stuff. It connects us to all mammals.
180 million years ago.
It connects us to fish 400 million years ago.
And it just keeps going. The scale is, it's hard to grasp. We share a literal physical ancestor with a tree 1.5 billion years ago.
So every single thread of life on this planet, from the oak tree outside to the bacteria in our gut.
It all converges. It all comes back to the very first dividing bacteria in some primordial soup about 3.8 billion years ago.
And this isn't philosophy. This is just biology.
It's just biology. The physical stuff of life has been dividing and growing on this planet for nearly 4 billion years without a single interruption.
So the immediate and kind of terrifying conclusion from the science alone is that all life on Earth is just one organism.
Scientifically speaking, yes. It's one massive continuous organism that's just been exploring every possible way to build itself, from a bacterium to a redwood to you.
Okay, let's sit with that for a second. If that's true, if we're all just, little bits of this single ancient entity, then why does it feel so profoundly, unshakably separate?
That is the absolute crux of it. And it brings us to section 2, the illusion of separation. The feeling of being an individual is, according to this theory, an unavoidable side effect of how we experience time.
Right. We're stuck seeing the world in 3D, and we move through the fourth dimension, time, 1 second at a time, like watching a movie 1 frame at a time.
Exactly. So when that one cell divides into 2, we see frame A, 1 cell, then we see frame B, 2 cells. And to us, it looks like 2 new separate things were created.
But if you could step outside of time, like Sarah Chen did in that lab,
you wouldn't see 2 separate things. You'd see one single structure. The sources use the analogy of like a dumbbell shape. It's one organism, but its shape gets really complex when you stretch it across a time dimension.
The tree analogy helps here, I think. If you watch a time lapse of an oak tree growing, in any single frame, a leaf looks separate from a branch. But when you see the whole thing, you know it's all one continuous structure that grew out of a single acorn.
Precisely. The separation is an illusion created by only looking at a 3D slice at one moment in time. The branch is connected to the trunk through its entire history. And a human being is just, well, a temporary cross-section of this colossal 4-dimensional life form.
And that's what Sarah saw. Her whole life was just one pattern in this superorganism. The whale, the bacteria, they were all just different parts of the same single unbroken thread.
And the emotional weight of that is just immense. If separation is an illusion, then every conversation she ever had...
Was the organism talking to itself?
Every war, was it fighting itself? Every act of love, was it loving itself?
Wow. I mean, how do you even process that? If I accept that the person I had an argument with yesterday is literally just another temporary shape of the same life that's in me, it changes everything.
It changes everything. And the guidance in the source material isn't really about, solving all conflict overnight. It's more about understanding the context.
That conflicts happen because the organism has just forgotten itself for a moment.
Exactly. It's a temporary, localized forgetting. Loneliness is just the organism forgetting its own vastness. And maturity for this whole thing is about putting all those experiences back together.
This sounds so familiar, though. It immediately brings to mind that famous short story. We have to talk about how this unbroken line theory stacks up against Andy Weir's story, The Egg.
Absolutely. The overlap is obvious, which is probably why these ideas resonate so much. Both stories are trying to answer that same basic question. Why are we here?
And both land on the same answer. We are all one. They both reframe death as just a transition, not an end.
And they both have that same ethical punchline. Every act of kindness you do, you're ultimately doing it to yourself.
But the differences are where it gets really interesting, I think. The Unbroken Line starts with biology. You can go and check in a textbook. It demands a scientific foundation.
Whereas the egg is pure metaphysics. It starts with the soul, with reincarnation. It asks for belief, not evidence.
And the scope is completely different. The Unbroken Line is, well, it's radically inclusive. It brings in the trees, the fungi, the bacteria. The unifying thing is the cell.
The egg is all about humans. It's anthropocentric. You are living the life of every human, one after another. And that changes the whole feel of it,
For sure. The line, because it forces you to realize you're basically 3.8 billion years of bacterial division in a human suit, it's kind of unnerving. It dissolves your personal importance.
But the egg feels warm, almost reassuring. You have to go through all the human hardship, sure, but it's a human story. It gives you a clear moral map. The line gives you a map of biology and time.
So you have the cold, hard, scientific reality of the Unbroken Line on one hand, and the warm, philosophical desire of the egg on the other. What happens when you put them together?
Well, that's where the source material proposes a synthesis, a combined idea it calls the continuum.
Okay, so what is the continuum?
It's basically a 2-layered model. Layer 1 is the physical reality we just established. The single, vast, 3.8 billion-year-old biological organism. That's the body.
And layer 2?
Layer 2 is the consciousness, the metaphysical part. One single thread of awareness, some sources call it God, that moves through that giant biological network, experiencing every single perspective, one life at a time.
So that answers the why. Why would it do this?
The story goes that this one consciousness was fundamentally alone. So it divided itself into this biological organism to forget itself.
So it could discover itself again, to solve its own loneliness.
Right. So every birth is a moment of necessary forgetting. You have to start fresh for the experience to feel real. And every death is a moment of remembering where those experiences get integrated back into the whole.
The scale of that is just, I can't even... The source material says that if you count every living thing right now, every cell, every insect...
That one consciousness is currently living about 400 trillion separate lives right now.
400 trillion. I mean, our human experience is such a tiny fraction of that. Why focus so much on us?
Because the complexity matters. A consciousness living as a bacterium learns about, cellular mechanics. A consciousness living as a human gets to learn about love and loss and art and moral choice.
And it's all going somewhere. The goal is maturity.
Precisely. This whole multi-trillion-year process is the organism growing up. The consciousness is just gathering data, gathering experience, until one day it will pull all those perspectives back together. It will be whole.
It will wake up.
It will wake up, finally ready to hold all of those experiences at once and truly know itself.
So in the end, whether you just stick to the hard science of the unbroken line or you're drawn to the bigger spiritual idea of the continuum, the takeaway is the same.
It really is. You are a temporary pattern in a single, ancient, continuous flow of life.
And knowing that just provides this incredible new lens. It changes what connection means, what purpose means.
Even what suffering means. It's all just part of this one colossal process of self-discovery.
It certainly reframes your daily life. If every relationship is just the organism learning to love itself, and every choice we make is the single awareness deciding its own future, it leaves you with a pretty profound question, doesn't it?
It does.
What choice is that magnificent 3.8 billion-year-old organism making right now, through you? That thread continues, and our deep dive is complete.
All right, let's dive into a really massive question today, one that kind of sits at the crossroads of biology, physics, and philosophy. It's all sparked by this amazing short story, and the core idea is pretty simple, but wow, the implications are just staggering. What if? What if all life on Earth isn't just related, but is literally one single thing?
This is the line that kicks the whole thing off. It's the very first sentence of the story that got us thinking about all this. I mean, right away, you're hooked, right? A scientist has this huge breakthrough, but it happens in the moments right after she dies. So the question is obvious.
What was it? What did she finally get? This one question is going to be our guide for this whole explainer. We're going to retrace Dr. Chen's final discovery piece by piece. We'll start with a solid scientific fact and end up with a perspective that might just change how you see, well, everything.
So, our journey is going to start right where Sarah's did, with the science. Before we get into all the mind-bending philosophical stuff, we've got to lay the groundwork, the biological foundation that this entire idea is built on.
You see, the really wild conclusion this story reaches, it's built on something every biologist on the planet already agrees on. This doesn't start with some spiritual or metaphysical theory. Nope, it starts with the simple, mechanical, nitty-gritty process of life itself. So, how do we get there? Well, it all starts by looking at you, personally. We're going to trace your existence backwards, not in years, but cell by cell.
Just look at this chain, this physical line of continuity. And I mean, really think about it for a second. A piece of your great-grandmother is, quite literally, inside you. Not just her DNA, not just an idea of her, but the actual physical stuff of her cells, passed down through an unbroken chain of cell division.
This concept is called uninterrupted continuation, and it's exactly what it sounds like. There was never a moment where the life in your family line stopped and a totally new one began. It's just one continuous, living, dividing thread, stretching all the way back through time. And let me tell you, it goes back a long, long way.
For 3.8 billion years, this chain of dividing cells, the one that leads directly to you, has never once been broken. Not for a single second. Every single one of your ancestors in that line successfully passed that living material on. I mean, that fact alone is pretty incredible when you stop to think about it.
Okay, so if your own personal chain is unbroken for billions of years, what happens when we trace it back really, really far? This is where the idea just explodes in scale.
See, that unbroken chain of cells, it doesn't just connect you to your human relatives. If you go back far enough, your chain actually merges with the chain of every other living thing. You and your dog, you share a cellular ancestor. You and that tree outside your window, you share an even older one. It all connects.
And this is what leads to this story's big radical conclusion. If every living thing's cellular chain is unbroken, and all of those chains eventually connect back to a single source, then isn't all life just one continuous branching organism? And we're not talking about a metaphor here. We're talking about a literal biological reality.
Okay, now for the part that really bends your brain. The story's big argument is that our feeling of being separate individuals, of being me and you, is just an illusion. It's a trick of how we see time. So to get this, we have to at least try to think in 4 dimensions.
So here's the big mental shift. In our normal, everyday 3D view, we see one cell divide and become 2 separate things. Simple enough. But imagine you could see all of time laid out at once, like a landscape. That's the 4D view. From that perspective, those 2 cells are still connected through their shared past. They aren't any more separate than your hand is from your arm. They're just different parts of the same object.
The story has this great little analogy to help us picture it. From that 4D perspective, a dividing cell is just a single, continuous object that's shaped kind of like a dumbbell. Now, from our limited 3D view, we're only seeing a slice of it at one single moment in time, so we just see the 2 separate ends. But in 4D, you'd see the whole thing, the handle connecting them and everything. And by that logic, you and I, we're just different points on one incredibly complex 3.8 billion-year-old being. This table just lays it all out so clearly. The column on the left, that's just scientific consensus. You won't find a biologist who'd argue with any of it. The column on the right, that's the philosophical leap, the interpretation that Sarah has in her final moments. It's not changing the facts, it's just a completely different way of seeing those same facts. So what? What's the point of all this? If we accept this perspective, even just as a thought experiment, what does it really change? What are the implications for how we actually live our lives?
Well, the first implication is huge. It completely reframes all of human conflict. If we are all just different parts of the same ancient, continuous organism, then every war, every fight, every single act of harm is just a form of self-mutilation.
And the flip side of that is just as powerful. Every act of kindness, every friendship, every moment of connection, well, that's just the organism caring for itself, loving itself. It gives a whole new biological weight to the idea of empathy.
And maybe this is the most profound one of all. It reframes our deepest pains. That feeling of being totally isolated and alone? From this perspective, that's the ultimate illusion. It's just the organism having a brief moment of amnesia, forgetting that it is and always has been fundamentally connected.
And this brings us right back to Dr. Chen's final understanding. What if our most basic assumption that we are all separate individuals is just plain wrong? If you, me, the person next to you, and the bacteria in your gut are all just temporary expressions of one continuous 3.8 billion-year-old life form, how does that change everything?